may be seated. So do you remember the fairy tale about the shoemaker and the elves? In case you haven't been reading your Brothers Grimm lately, let me give you the Cliff's Notes version. A shoemaker and his wife are down on their luck. They have no money and only enough leather for a single pair of shoes. So one night, the shoemaker cuts out the leather and leaves it on his bench to be sewn up in the morning. While the shoemaker sleeps, two naked elves, and this nudity is not gratuitous, by the way, it becomes relevant later. Two naked elves come into the shop and make the shoes. The shoemaker is stunned the next morning when he finds a perfect pair of shoes where he'd left the leather. His first customer buys the handsome shoes and pays a handsome price, giving the shoemaker enough money to buy leather for 2 more pairs of shoes. Maybe you remember the rest. That night the elves return the leather into 2 pairs of shoes, and the cobbler sells them and buys leather for 4, and so on, and so on. And gradually the shoemaker and his wife prosper. Then one night they decide to stay up, find out who's been making the shoes. They watch the elves work their magic, and in the morning the shoemaker's wife says, "The little men have made us rich, and we should show our gratitude." So she makes the naked elves clothing and asks her husband to make them shoes. The following night they lay out the gifts, and when the elves arrive, they are pleased and surprised. They put on the clothes and they sing, "We're sleek, we're fine, we're out the door, we shan't be cobblers anymore." And the elves never return. But the shoemaker continues to prosper in all that he does, we're told. Now, Lewis Hyde calls this story a parable of a gifted person. At the story's outset, the shoemaker is poor. For some reason, his gift, his talent, his worth is not available to him any longer. It seems like the key to the story lies in the magic of the elves who come each night to do their work. But the magic does not cease when they leave, does it? Something in the return of the gift, something in the gratitude of the cobbler and his wife releases not only the elves, but releases the gift for shoemaking that lay dormant inside the poor man for so long. His worth, his gift becomes available to him once again. The question may sound a little sacrilegious to you, but what I'm actually wondering today is whether the healing of blind Bartimaeus might at least share something with this parable of a gifted person. Would something new open up for you if the gifted person in our gospel lesson for today turned out to be Bartimaeus? 2 times in the 10th chapter of Mark, Jesus asks a very clear question: "What do you want me to do for you?" Aren't there days when you wish Jesus would show up and ask you that question? There are for me. He asks it first of James and John, after they say, "Teacher, we want you to do whatever we ask of you." Remember that from last week? James and John, they want to sit at his right hand and his left hand when he comes into his kingdom. They want the places of honor. And Jesus tells them that actually those seats are not his to give away. Sorry, sons of thunder. It's not for lack of trying that you're going to be sitting in the cheap seats with the rest of us sinners in glory. But their question reminds me that I can tend to think of Jesus as something of a divine elf, if you will. Someone ready to scamper into my life at night and give me whatever it is I don't have. Dear God, I want you to do whatever I ask of you is just a blunter version of a very familiar prayer to me. But then, in today's reading, it's just a few verses later, a blind man named Bartimaeus cries out to Jesus from the roadside. And Jesus asks his question again: "What do you want me to do for you?" But unlike James and John, Bartimaeus' request is granted. His sight is restored. But wait a minute. What Jesus asked was, "What do you want me to do for you?" What he said to blind Bartimaeus was, "Go. Your faith has made you well." Jesus won't take credit for the doing, will he? Bartimaeus' faith, something within him, not something Jesus has done for him, is what Jesus credits for the restoration of a blind man's sight. Maybe Bartimaeus gains access to a gift that had lain dormant within him for many, many years. Two stories lie next to each other in Mark. Two stories in which Jesus asks, "What do you want me to do for you?" And the outcomes are very different. James and John are told that things are not going to end well for them, and that the prime seats they request are not Jesus's to assign. Blind Bartimaeus comes and gets exactly what he came to Jesus for, his sight. But Jesus doesn't claim to have given him that sight. "Your faith has made you well," is what he says. At first blush, the different outcomes seem to be tied to what people are asking Jesus for, right? James and John are asking to be given special places of honor. Bartimaeus just wants to be able to see like almost everybody else in the world can. But over and over in Mark, Jesus seems fascinated with the gifts within the people that he meets. Gifts they may have access to, or gifts they may have lost touch with. He feels power go out of him when a woman who'd bled for 12 years touches the hem of his cloak. He turns and says, "Daughter, your faith has made you well." Or in a less happy moment, Jesus returns to his hometown and can do no deed of power there, we're told. He was amazed at their unbelief. Or when people pull apart a roof and lower a paralyzed man through it to Jesus, it's because of the faith of the lame man's friends that he says, "Son, your sins are forgiven. Take up your mat and walk." Over and again in Mark, people see again and walk again and hear that the sins of their past will lose their claim on the future. But to so many of these healed ones, Jesus says, the healing power, the faith, the gift, was alive in you already. I'm just helping you gain access to it again. A 19th century clergyman in Scotland once said, "Be kind. Everyone you meet is fighting a great battle." I find this helpful. It's a good reminder that whatever a person says or does in a particular moment might spring from some struggle way deeper down. And what I wonder is whether your faith has made you well is also about that place deeper down within us. And how would it change me if I could remember to be kind because everyone I meet is fighting a great battle? And how would it change me also if I remembered that everyone I meet is gifted? Everyone I meet carries the spark of something eternal, the spark of wholeness and health, even if they can't walk or see. I think faith is access to that spark, that gift. Faith is not certainty, and faith isn't belief in a fact. It's not even belief that Jesus will give us what we want, whether that's a seat of honor or to have our sight restored. Faith is contact with the spark of who you are. Faith is touching the giftedness you're made to let go of in the world, something everybody carries, and it's the only thing that will make any of us truly well. Well, there's one more thing to be said about Bartimaeus, and about shoemakers and about you and me as well, I think. Bartimaeus' sight wasn't returned to him for his own sake. His sight wasn't a private possession for his personal enjoyment alone. Sight was what allowed him to get up from the side of the road and offer his giftedness back to the world once again. You might think old stories about elves are just silly, but I put to you that at least one of them is very, very wise. One tells us that it's only when a cobbler and his wife reach back out with their giftedness that liberation really happens in this life. Perhaps the end of the gospel story is not the gift of sight back to Bartimaeus, but the gift of Bartimaeus back to the world. So where are you in this sacred parable of a gifted person? Do you find yourself wanting Jesus to do whatever you ask of him? Do you find yourself blinded, begging, maybe out of commission on the side of the road? Maybe a little bit of each, even on a good day, if we're honest. I believe Jesus is still in the business of making our worth, our gifts, available to us once again, twice again, 3 times, and over and again in our lives. And each time he's telling us not, I have healed you, but go. Give the bright spark of your life away. Your faith has made you well. Amen.